trying to walk the walk, truth on the mic, no shame here, just real talk. Came from the outside, never fit in. Now we tell the story and the healing begins. No front, no mask, just telling the truth. Keep it real, keep it raw, speaking straight from the booth. If you feeling like an outsider, this one's for you. Yeah.
Welcome to another episode of Unashamed Unafraid, unashamed of sexual addiction recovery and unafraid of coming unto Christ for healing. Why do we even do this? I get anxiety before every podcast recording, truth be told, because it makes me nervous. It can be a challenge. It can be a challenge to do what we do. We have to push through some barriers to get these podcasts out. I've just been thinking about that.
I just love that it still makes you nervous, man.
I know, I'm a year in.
I think that's so funny because you have been doing this for a long time and it's not new. Maybe it's just the excitement that you have. That's the same feeling that you feel in your body. So maybe instead of being nervousness, it's excitement for you, brother.
Yep. Yeah. My nervous system is trying to process what we're doing. Never thought about it that way. Well, in any case, I think it's helpful for people and we're so glad to be a part of it. Today, we have a professional on with us, Austin Hamilton. Austin, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Thanks
Welcome,
for having
brother.
me. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for being on. So you flew in today at 1:30 p.m. That was when your flight left from Phoenix to be here, and you're flying out at 10:50 right after we record this.
That's right. I'll be here for 8 hours total.
That is dedication.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Incredible. Thank you for being on.
Yeah.
Would you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, whenever I'm asked to come speak about pornography publicly on the internet or anywhere else, the answer is pretty much always yes. So if I have to hop on a short flight, I'm happy to do so. To be called a professional, that's quite the tall order. When dealing with a topic that is so deep and sacred and vulnerable to the human heart, the human condition, and the questions that we have to ask ourselves to truly be healed or to work towards healing and recovery are some of the deepest questions that anybody can ever ask themselves. We plumb the depths of our hearts, and I find that there's always more to be discovered about myself and my heart and those around me that I love. So why do I do this? Well, 40 years old, thought I had a great marriage. Been married for 14 years, same woman. We have 3 beautiful children, and thought marriage was great. Realized that it wasn't as great as I thought it was. We were in a marriage conference together in 2017, August of 2017. That's when our D-Day happened, Discovery Day. You know, my wife and I were like, oh yeah, our marriage is fine. Maybe it can get a little better. Maybe we can learn a couple tools. And it was during that workshop, during that conference, that I realized, oh my gosh, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep on living the lie of not only hiding an addiction to pornography that started when I was about 12 years old, but also infidelity that I had committed in my marriage early on. And it was over the course of that weekend that I decided the show's over. I got to confess this to my wife. And that's when my life, our lives changed forever. I realized that weekend that I had to come forward with this secret. She never knew that I struggled with pornography, never knew that I had an affair, nothing.
And how long were you married at this point?
I was married about 6 years at that point. So the infidelity happened within the first year or two of our marriage, and then it stopped. I held it in, swore that I would take it to the grave for about 4 years, and then confessed to her at about the 6-year mark. So that was maybe obviously, not so obviously, one of the hardest things that I did, and the most devastating things that my wife had to be on the receiving end of was me coming forward to her and backing up a full truckload worth of trauma and infidelity and betrayal and pain and putting that right on her. Well, she was 8 months pregnant with our second child, by the way. So it's not a contest, but I really did a great job at the whole disclosure thing.
What gave you the courage to say, okay, here it is, and I'm going to just go and talk to her?
Yeah.
I mean, I know you were at the conference and all that, but what was it that gave you the courage to be like, here I go.
Yeah.
Regardless of what happens, I got to tell her.
Yeah, totally. And I love the word courage. I got it tattooed on my hand earlier this year, the Latin root word for courage, which is core. Courage is everything. So I love that. It was the realization that I couldn't live my life anymore authentically and fully, not wanting to be on the planet anymore. I was a shell of a person who didn't even know how to love anybody, much less love myself or honor myself for the gift that I am. And over the course of this workshop, it was realizing this is a pretty bad way to live. Not just for my wife, though that is obviously very important, but because I can't give or receive love when I am living in this lie. And so the courage to have humility and to say, I've got it wrong. I've got a lot of things wrong in my life up until this point, and to come forward is one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I think courage is the only thing that could sustain through that, which is saying, you know what, the cost of this doesn't matter. Not that it obviously wasn't impactful to my wife, but the cost is too great to keep this in, right? I can't be the husband I want to be, the father I want to be, the son that I want to be, the man that I want to be if I don't come forward with this secret. And, you know, I'm sure we'll use the words courage and shame a lot in this podcast, but being buried in shame is just something that feels like you can never get out of it. And it grows and grows and grows, and you hold it inside. And I think it's a courageous act to say, you know what, I'm going to name this, I'm going to get it out there, and I'm going to choose a different path. So I think it's the courage to live. There's that meme going around a lot now. A lot of men are like, I would die for my family, which is good and right, probably.
But would you live for
live for your family?
Wow.
Right? And so that's like the conundrum I was in. Like I would have said I would have died for my family, but I 0% was living for my family. The only thing I was living for was Austin Hamilton, to feel good and to try to look good amongst my peers or whoever I was trying to impress. So that's what unraveled this whole thing for me. And you know, I confessed to my wife. We've done all the work over the last 8 years and continue to do all the work, you know, therapy, coaching, counseling, intensives. I lead groups, I participate in groups, I lead intensives, I participate in intensives. If somebody claims that they can help me move forward in this journey, I'll probably take you up on that offer.
Wow.
And so,
yeah.
Awesome, man. So tell us what worked in recovery.
Yeah, that's such a great question. I was talking to a friend of mine.
You tell her everything, right? And then everything's like perfect and blissful.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
like,
and
you're
that's
starting
it.
this new career and
And
everything's
that's it.
rocking and rolling.
Yeah.
The next day you became a pornography recovery coach.
Yeah. No, so I've been about 8 years in this, 8.5 years, and still married to the same woman. We have 3 beautiful children. You know, there's a lot of authors who I read in this area that I really respect, and there's some that I'm just like, we can throw some of that stuff out. But I think the ones that stand out, Dr. David Schnarch, he's written a lot on the topic, the book Intimacy and Desire. He says, and he's a therapist, he's a PhD in psychology, he says 70% of marriage therapy fails. It doesn't work. Okay, and that's coming from one of the guys who's like authored the books on this stuff.
Yeah.
So that's discouraging right out of the gate, right? And there's many others in this space who realistically talking about how ineffective some tools are, but while some other tools are very effective. I was talking to a friend of mine recently. I was like, you know, I don't even know what works anymore because it seems like nothing works, but also everything works. And I think the point is we need a lot of different tools, and some tools work in some situations at certain points for certain people, different points in the journey for different people. And most of them are useful to some degree, but all tools and strategies are limited to an extent. But to sum it up, I think it's telling the truth. Just telling the truth no matter what the cost. Jordan Peterson says, whatever happens as a consequence of telling the truth is the best thing that can happen. And the reason why we don't tell the truth is because usually we're afraid of what might happen. If somebody knew this part about me, or if it was an unpopular opinion, or you know, whatever might happen telling the truth. But I think it has to be put out there.
Totally.
And so that the concept of disclosure in porn recovery process or infidelity recovery process is a truth-telling activity. It's a truth-telling exercise. So having the courage to name the truth, courageously get it out there, and let the cards fall while they may is vitally
And we're
important.
talking like everything, laying it all out on the table. I mean, we have a podcast that is all about how the proper way of doing disclosure. So listen to that episode because it's really important to do the disclosure the right way.
Yeah.
So there isn't more harm done. But like coming out and saying, no, you need to know all of me so you can make a decision.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah, and it's funny, I was talking to somebody recently too. Has anybody ever done the disclosure the right way the first time? You know, like
very few.
Very few. Like a lot of therapists, and you know, there's a lot of literature on it where it's like, here's what a disclosure could look like or should look like, which I agree.
In our practice, yes, we're doing that and changing the world on how they're doing disclosure the right way.
Well, it's there's a lot of templates and a lot of tools for it, and it's really hard to get what's out there out the first time because there's usually so much shame buried in it, right?
Totally.
And having the right tools and resources to help extract that is vitally important because there's usually a lot of details that are covered in lies and shame over years or decades, and to actually find the root of that can be hard for a lot of people to come out with. So.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice if we could just load up on our first disclosure and say, well, I've been living a lie for the past however many years of my life. It started with shame when I was a child. These are the interactions that really affected me. Here's the trauma that occurred. Here's how it changed my behavior. Mm-hmm. Here's how it shaped my worldview. And this is why I act the way that I act.
Exactly.
Wouldn't that be nice? If we could do that.
It would be beautiful, right? It would be beautiful. But unfortunately, human beings just don't operate that way, especially when you're, buried in addiction for years.
Sure.
Right?
So did your wife create any safety for you to be able to come to her and tell her that stuff? Because she didn't know.
We went to this conference Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
And would you recommend other people go to this conference?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
let's give them a shout out. Who is it?
Well, yeah, it's called, there's a couple different variations, but it's called the Restored Training. The marriage-focused one is called the Unlimited Workshop. I'm now a facilitator in these workshops that we do. But really, it's a context, it's an environment to look at what's going on in your life or your marriage and to consider the impact that you're having on other people and course-correcting that accordingly, which in marriage oftentimes relies on intimacy, which is, again, a truth-telling exercise of telling the truth of what's really going on. So we went to that workshop, and I didn't tell her during the workshop. I decided I was going to tell her. And then I phoned a friend the day after, the Monday after the workshop, a pastor friend of mine, hey, man, I need help. I've been hiding the secret. I got to tell my wife, what do I do? He referred me to a coach who I began meeting with, and then I did a terrible disclosure the following Friday, the first attempt of the disclosure, right? And probably by about the next week had passed, it all got out there, right, in the disclosure. She was devastated. Obviously, I just hit her by a bus. I'm feeling great because I finally got the secret off my chest that I've been carrying for 2 decades. But she's devastated. She's pregnant. So she started seeing a therapist a month or so later. I started seeing a therapist. And we began working through all the unspoken conversations in our marriage, in my life, that I've been dealing with for so long. So yes, she created safety in the sense that she was willing to hang in there with me. She was mad. She was really mad. Which,
rightfully so, yeah.
Rightfully so. She should have been. And I'm, obviously forever grateful that she's still with me and we have a beautiful version of our marriage now. But yeah, I think safety has to be there for both parties to actually talk about what's going on. And that's usually why we're afraid of being intimate, because we're afraid of being rejected. Because if we share these parts of us, what might happen? Right?
Yeah. So you do disclosure, like no more acting out, or was there still acting out and you still told her about those things? What was that like for you?
Yeah, so my story is a little unique in the sense, like, typically there's a pattern of acting out, getting caught, saying you'll never do it again, acting out, repeating that cycle. Again, I had a squeaky clean record for my whole life in the sense that, like, nobody knew. And I'm not proud of that. Like, it's actually a terrible testament to how good I was and I guess could still be at hiding things. But my acting out behavior, the physical infidelity, the physical cheating, that, like I said, stopped about 4 years prior. And really the pornography use in those subsequent 4 years was relatively low, right? Not that it's comparison, but it's not like I was using it every day, right? Probably maybe once a week or once a month. But for all intents and purposes, August 2017, that's D-Day. That's the time I say that I gave it up. Deep down in my heart, I knew it was wrong. I always knew it was wrong from the moment I saw pornography the first time to every time I used it, to all the infidelities and betrayals. So when I came clean, it was a total, 180, run away from it. This is awful. This is terrible for me. I never want to see it again. Now, does that mean I don't struggle with temptation? No, that's a thing, right? Nothing in me wants to look at pornography ever again or have an affair, because that just is a road that I've been down and I hate it and I don't want to go there. Right. So that was actually, in my story, that was pretty easy in the sense to not want to go back to it, because that began the unraveling of my life, which is what got me here in the first place. And now how do I figure out the roots of that and heal?
Totally.
Yeah.
You found sobriety relatively quickly within the time period after your initial disclosure. What were the things that you and your wife had to figure out? I think you used the word unspoken conversations.
Yep. we still get to learn how to do those conversations that are hard, right? Courageous conversations. So at that time, we had been married for about 6 years, and we thought everything was fine, right? We thought we had this great marriage, but we clearly didn't. And looking back on it, from essentially when we got home from our honeymoon, it's like, this was pretty terrible, and we didn't know what to do. There were many times early on in our marriage where we're like, oh, we maybe should get some help or see a counselor or tell somebody that we're having problems, but we never did. And that's something that her and I, we both are like, why did we not do that? What was going on for us to where we wouldn't ask for help, right? I'm not blaming her, but it's like, we didn't do that. And should I have led in that? Sure. So that was kind of baffling. And that's where I think a new level of intimacy was actually able to begin, by having some really good coaches help us through this journey and have the conversations that we never had. Sexual intimacy, relational intimacy, dealing with in-laws, parenting together, right? We had 2 kids at that point. We had a third one a few years later. So being able to have hard conversations, but do it knowing we have to do this because this is how intimacy is built, and relationships have to have communication, safety, and trust in order to build a foundation that's going to last.
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah.
So you talked about doing disclosure the wrong way and the right way. So what advice do you have for those who have tried and failed, but know that they need to do it again? They need to do disclosure the right way.
Yeah, I mean, you have to clean house on everything that could be there. Like, what is in there that needs to come out? And that thing that you're thinking about right now, that needs to be disclosed as well. That place you went, that thing you paid for, that woman you saw, that thing you did in the bathroom by yourself at work, that extra scrolling you did on your phone, it all needs to be on the table.
Yeah.
And some people don't agree with that. And I don't agree with them, because you're withholding something.
Totally.
You're hiding a part of you, and that's where shame festers. The reason why you're not saying it is because there's something shameful in there that's preventing you from saying it, and that'll keep you stuck. And it'll prevent relational intimacy from happening. You know, there's all sorts of different tools you can use. One of the ones I use, like a table that goes through your addictive behavior, whether it's pornography, drugs, alcohol, any other addictive behaviors, the frequency, the use, the cost. It kind of helps jog your memory on what all the things were. Where were you when you were doing it, when you were acting out? I think there's also the honest reality that some details are going to surface later, and they weren't intentionally withheld. Okay? For example, say you're acting out with an affair partner, and during the initial disclosure, either it wasn't brought up with whoever's walking the people through that, or it wasn't relevant at the time. Maybe the location is a detail that wasn't pertinent at the initial disclosure, but later becomes more relevant. Like, say, maybe years after disclosure, you have a new favorite restaurant and you keep driving by a location where you acted out, right? It wasn't relevant at the time of the disclosure to talk about that specific detail, but now that you're together, you're in the car, you're driving by it every time, it brings up something in you. That might be something that needs to be disclosed later. Yeah. So noticing that that's coming up, it doesn't materially change the disclosure, right? It's not like there's an additional affair partner or another time you acted out. It's just a detail of the initial disclosure. So I think there has to be room for that, to have the safety to say, you know what, there may be details that become more relevant that weren't intentionally withheld, and I can bring that to you. And not to say it's not going to hurt, right?
Totally.
It oftentimes may hurt. I've shared things with my wife over the years where it hurt. But there's also times where I've shared details with her about certain things, and she's like, oh, okay, all right, well, what's for dinner?
Yeah. Me and my wife had conversations just this week about stuff. And she's like, hey, when you were having affairs, did you even care about me and think about me? And I mean, dude, I'm 17 and a half years sober from being with other women.
Yeah.
And I'm like, parts of me didn't care about you.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to be open about that because I know we've had that conversation. And I'm like, yeah, there's part of me that didn't care.
Yeah.
Austin, correct me if I'm wrong. What I'm hearing you say is that disclosure is really more of a lifestyle that you begin to live rather than just a single thing that you have to keep doing until you get it right.
Yeah, well, I think it's both, right? I mean, yes, it's truthfulness at all costs. And post-betrayal, there is an event where disclosure needs to happen, a formal disclosure, a therapeutic disclosure, whatever you want to call it. And it's a commitment to telling the truth at all costs, because telling the truth is always better than not telling the truth.
Yeah.
And not telling the truth doesn't necessarily mean intentionally withholding, though it can and often does, but it could be something comes up later and, hey, I got to bring this to you. Like, can we have this conversation?
Right. Yep.
So yeah, I think it's both. It's an event and it's a way of being.
What kind of an impact did that have on your recovery?
Yeah, so there's a story I tell, the last lie I ever told my wife, which is about a year after D-Day. And I say that facetiously, not to indicate that I'm perfect and I don't lie. Okay, it's to prove a point, right? Though I really try not to intentionally lie or deceive. About a year after D-Day, I went to the casino and my wife knew about it. Now, I was never really addicted to gambling. I enjoyed playing poker in college, and maybe once every few years I would go to the casino, right? So this is post D-Day. My life has turned around. I'm like, hey, I'd like to just go enjoy, playing some poker at the casino. It's something I used to do. And the agreement we had was I would risk up to $200. Okay, so up to $200.
No big deal.
Doesn't matter, right? So are you guys poker fans at all? You know the game? Okay, so I'm playing Texas Hold'em. I'm doing really well. I don't remember the hand. Doesn't matter, but I had a lot of money in front of me. I had a great hand, great position, all the right things to win a really big pot, and I got smoked with a bad beat. Lost everything. So, it was $600, something like that, some significant amount compared to the amount of money I was playing with. And I was frustrated. I was like, I should have won that hand. This was so fun. I haven't played in a while. So what do I do in my infinite wisdom?
Take a guess. Another $200.
Go grab another $200. Exactly, right? And the same thing happened. So I'm crushing it. Maybe I wasn't crushing it as much as I thought, right? But I was playing really well. I had another bad beat, lost it all. And by the way, this was the day before my wife's birthday. Okay, so this is Saturday night, early in the morning, 2 a.m. So I'm like, all right, great. Now I get to go home. One, just tired. I very rarely drink, so it's not like alcohol was at play. But I'm like, I'm going to be useless the next day on my wife's birthday. Buried in shame from breaking a promise, a financial infidelity, right? So what did I do on her birthday? I didn't tell her because that was the better idea, right? Don't tell her because that'll be easier.
It's her birthday. I don't want to ruin her birthday.
I don't want to ruin her birthday, right? So I waited till Monday to tell her. I told her on Monday, which of course made it 10 times worse. So that's the moment I realized, don't lie to this woman, and just don't lie, because it never works.
Right.
But why do I lie? Because I'm trying to protect something inside my own heart.
Totally.
Right. So again, that telling the truth at all costs is something that I think is just vitally important in relationships, especially in marriage, because if we don't, we're creating a wedge between ourselves and our partner.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what are some other tools within recovery that became useful to you as you began to progress?
Yeah, I think diving into the root of the issue. In my experience, the more I learn about this, the more books I read, the more I work with people. I'm over-dramatizing when I say it, but nothing else works but driving into the root of the pain.
You got to figure out what is driving the issue.
Exactly. Like you can try to behavior modify your way out of this, but it's always going to fall short until you dive into the root of the issue. And there's ways to do that, right? Of course, working with a therapist or coach or counselor or being in recovery groups where you can actually dive into that pain. But identifying that pain, figuring out what the wounding was from that pain, and then healing is a sustainable approach.
Well said.
So in your practice, with your coaching practice, what are things that you're doing right now to help someone get deeper?
Mm-hmm. I taught this in my groups last night and today in my men's groups. I went through the 8 arousal structures that are built in early childhood experiences and what the themes in pornography are that connect to those childhood experiences. And a lot of that I draw from Jay Stringer's book, Unwanted. Are you guys familiar with that?
I was just about to ask.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Best book on the topic. So kind of just walking through those, is there abandonment, a misattunement as a kid? Are you looking for comfort or sensuality? Are you trying to regain some sort of power or control in your life, and seeing those themes playing out in the pornography you watch? Jay Stringer, he said, show me the kind of porn you watch and I'll tell you the kind of trauma that you had. He says something like that, which I think is such a fascinating statement. But it's also true when you dive into this. So I was teaching this in my groups this week, and it just created a lot of really good, somber conversation drawing into childhood stories. Mine is rooted in abandonment and trauma from losing my mother at a young age. So when I was 5 years old, my mom died in a plane crash. And that was a devastating event that happened in my life. Obviously, now I can say that, but I didn't tell the truth about that growing up. I led myself to believe that event didn't affect me. That's the lie that I told myself my whole life. And you have a smirk on your face, which I'm in agreement with you of, by the way. It's like, That's a crock, right?
Yeah.
That wound as a 5-year-old boy, then having to go pretend to show up in life and be okay and hide and go to school and then go through puberty without a mother to be attached to, that creates all sorts of wounding, right? And so some of the themes in pornography, even as I was teaching this last night, which I do all the time, like thinking about that sensual love, care, and affection from a motherly, nurturing figure is something that my body forever craves and desires. And I thought I was getting that in pornography, in the type of pornography that I watched, discovering pornography around 11, 12 years old, and in infidelity, but it was all a counterfeit, my subconscious was trying to medicate this wound that I had going on in my heart that went all the way back to that event, losing my mom, and the meaning that I made from that at the time.
This is a topic I've been fascinated with. My own lived experience with that was I had a sponsor in 12 Steps who, he didn't even really act as a functioning sponsor. He was more of a coach for me in some ways. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that really opened up my world in my recovery was he had me analyze a fantasy that I had that kept coming back over and over and over again. As we talked about it, I realized the same things that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Why is it important to figure out what's underneath?
Yeah, because it's the only thing that works. Again, I'm not saying that literally. There are plenty of tools that work and can bring you closer to freedom. But you're going to keep on playing those fantasies until you can put them to bed in terms of the meaning of why does this fantasy keep coming to mind. Jay Stringer, he says, you're not addicted to pornography. You're addicted to the type of pornography that you're drawn to.
Right.
Right?
Most people always stick with the same thing. They keep going to the same stories.
Exactly. And there's other types of pornography that is just not arousing. Maybe it's even repulsive that you wouldn't want to watch or you wouldn't click on, right? And so that right there proves the point that this is not just about looking at genitals banging together on a screen. There's something way deeper than this. And a lot of people stay at the surface level of that. No fap. Oh, I just got to stop watching porn. I got to stop masturbating. All right, fine, try that. But see how far that gets you until you dive into the root of the issue. Like, why am I going to look at these same things and I feel like filth afterwards, and then I go back to it again? What am I trying to reenact or reverse in my story that's keeping me stuck in this?
Once you've identified this with men and they feel like they have a clear sense of where these things are coming from, the desires, the urges, the fantasies, where do you go with that?
Great question. One, that does bring in the behavior modification component. Behavior modification is useful and we need that, right? So it's like abstaining from it, getting away from it, trying to put blockers and tools in place. But those are only useful to the extent that they're buying time for the true healing to occur beneath the surface, which is what the heart of your question is addressing. The story work with Jay Stringer, Dan Allender, Adam Young, kind of that school of thought is diving into your story. The stories will feel a bit unresolved as we process them. Or maybe differently put, I don't know the answer to some of those questions. I don't know that I can ever fully resolve in my heart the question, did my mom love me? Logically, I can tell you yes. I have pictures and videos that would indicate that. But there's something that feels unresolved about that question for me. I have to continuously engage in some sort of process that reminds me of the reality of the trauma that occurred when she died, the grief or lack thereof in the next 25 years or 35 years and counting, and re-engaging that process. Not to say that there's no hope for true healing to occur. It's absolutely possible. And things are going to come up in life that will remind us of those core wounds, and then we get to deal with them again.
My father took his life when I was 17, right? And so I didn't deal with any of the emotions around it until 15 years later when I went to Warrior Heart boot camp.
Yeah.
And then I was like, what the hell? I've never dealt with these emotions ever.
Exactly.
And it wrecked me, right? There's times where things will come up with my dad, but I process it way different. It doesn't affect me like it did before.
Yep.
I'm in a totally different mindset with it. I don't have anger with my dad.
Yeah.
I'm not pissed off. I'm not acting out, trying to find my place anymore.
Yep.
I feel like I'm healed from that trauma that's been there.
Yeah. It's like the healing occurs and then there's a scar there.
Yeah.
And sometimes scars feel funny, right? And then you itch them and it kind of has that weird feeling. And, you know, there's going to be that reminder there.
Totally.
Yeah. I like how you put that. Yeah.
I like, Austin, the word that you keep using, which is process, engage in some sort of process. As a coach, how do you help guys get into the process?
Yeah, I think to get somebody into the game, which they have to decide that they want to do it, first of all, right? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Mm-hmm. The willingness has to be there. The want to has to precede the how to, right? You can tell somebody how to do it all day long, but it doesn't matter if they don't want to. Number one, I think it's having the courage to name and identify, one, that you have a problem, right? I have a problem with pornography.
Right.
I have a problem with infidelity or with lusting or seeking type behavior. So just identifying you have the problem and then creating the space or the container where they can just keep on talking about that, right? So what is the problem? When did it start? How is this affecting your life? What are the roots of this problem, right? There's core questions that I'm sure we all share in some variation that we walk people through, but it's naming the behavior, how that behavior is hindering you from what you're wanting in life, and then getting to the root of that behavior. I have my clients do like an intake questionnaire, which is a high-level overview of your whole life. What got you to this point in life? Why are you here? What are you wanting to change? And then there's certain themes you can pick up on.
Totally.
There's certain traumas that may stick out that it's like, okay, you think your parents divorcing when you were 4 didn't affect you? Okay, got it. Well, we'll save that for session 3, right? And just dive into that. So I think creating safety for people to be willing to share and then knowing how to draw out the right pieces at the right times in order to bring them into an awareness of their story, what got them there, what keeps them there, and then developing new tools to be in a process to stay on a healthier path.
Wow. Yeah, I see that whole process in myself as you're talking about that. I'm maybe even not as far along into that as I'd want to be, but the piece of that where you have to go in and gain better perspective on what has happened to you and how that's affected you certainly has been true in my life. It's the knowing what to do with that is rather challenging for me and continues to be challenging. When you work with guys on this kind of stuff, is this primarily in a one-on-one setting where you talk these things out and you try to pull them out and process them through a conversation, or are there other types of tools that you use?
It depends. So I host a live show, you could call it, on TikTok, where I engage people on debate whether pornography is cheating or good or useful in relationships, and it's fascinating. People share all sorts of stuff with me on there. Porn Coach on TikTok, so Pxrn Coach. Okay. Pxrn Coach on all the platforms, but TikTok is kind of my main one. That is not a therapeutic model. It shouldn't be viewed as such. It is entertainment and very helpful for people who are navigating porn addiction or betrayal. Yeah. But when it comes to my actual coaching practice, so I do one-on-one coaching, both for men who are struggling with unwanted sexual behavior, as well as women who are dealing with betrayal trauma. And I also run coaching groups for both men who are going through unwanted sexual behavior and women who are going through betrayal trauma. I work with couples as well, both in individualized settings as well as in group settings. We do workshops as part of the coaching that I offer. Group work can be a really interesting animal, depending on where people are coming in, where they're starting. And you've got people that have been there for years, and you have people that just came to an awareness that pornography is a problem and they're on day one, and it's like Bambi on ice as they're trying to navigate this. What I'm always looking for is creating the context and helping people feel comfortable enough to share what's really going on in their heart. And that happens by sharing my own story as well as, creating the context for other people who are farther along in the journey to share. I've been doing this professionally for about 3 years now, and so I've got guys in my groups who have been in the group for over 2 years, and they're not there because they still watch porn. They're there because they love open, intimate, authentic connection that they can have with other men, while also being a gift to other men. They can now help somebody else earlier in the journey. And it's always, a really humbling thing when we have a new guy in the group, and I've already met with them because I always meet with people before they join the group, so I know what they're probably about to share. And then to see them do it in front of a group of 20 or 30 guys on Zoom who are all staring at them, it's always difficult, and it's always so freeing. You can just see the shame break down right in front of your eyes. It's super impactful. Constantly diving back into pain. Like, what's the source of the pain? Why do people go to destructive behaviors? Because we're trying to medicate some sort of pain, usually, or we're replaying something from our past, right? And so just being attuned to what those themes could be, and as a coach, maybe drawing awareness to that or highlighting where that pain could be, In my one-on-one coaching, particularly with couples, I'm really trying to create conversation with the couples back and forth, just sharing these parts of them and traumas that they've been holding on to in isolation that they didn't even know about. Okay, so let's talk about that. What are the stories that you make up from that? So, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to go with it, but essentially it's getting what's in here that we're maybe too afraid to bring to the light, to bring it to the light courageously so that we can have freedom over it.
As you've gone through recovery over the last 8 years,
yeah.
What are some of the most important themes that have stuck out as being critical to success in recovery?
In terms of tools, journaling is vitally important. Like, I do story work with my clients.
So why is that important? Why is journaling so powerful?
Yeah, there's research that backs this up, that when you actually put pen to paper, like literal pen or pencil to a piece of paper, there's something that happens in your body as you're getting whatever that story is out onto paper. It's totally different than thinking it, than saying it, than typing into your phone or on a computer. It's different when you actually use a pen and write it down on a piece of paper. What you can do is you can see the story differently, right? So I've done a lot of story work in my work where I wrote down stories, and it could be a grief story. It could be eulogizing my dad. I did a writing exercise around that. It could be about some of the destructive behavior that I was engaged in, writing down what happened, maybe themes from my childhood. And what that does, it allows you to separate yourself from the story, not disassociating, but to be able to see it in a different way. As opposed to the story owning you, you can look at it as part of your life, part of your story. And then you get to decide, what do you do with that? Right? So now I've got the story out of my body. Now I can see it in a different way, and it feels different. I resisted that work for a long time.
Most men do. Women are like, yeah, I'll journal like crazy. And then but most men are like, nope.
I don't even want to talk about
I'm not going to talk about it, and I am definitely not going to put it on paper, because then what if somebody gets that paper and they're going to see it and they're going to see who I am, and they're going to be, hell no.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. So that's why sometimes we burn it afterwards. So we burn the story, literally. You can see it go away. Yeah, I had a couple, so typically I shoot for like 2,000 words when I do story work. Write a story about 2,000 words, which is roughly 2 pages. Usually it's harder for a man to get there, and usually it's hard for a woman to stop there. So I had a guy, he wrote about 500 words, which is half a page. I'm like, all right, hey, good job. It's a great start. And the woman wrote like 13 pages. I'm like, okay, all right.
Probably in the same amount of time.
Yes. Yeah. So we might need a little bit more time to unpack this one, which is no problem. But I think that tool is a way to help explore the pieces of your life and your story that may need attention. Forgetting things is a strategy, and remembering things is a strategy. So my lie that I told myself, my mom died when I was 5, but it hasn't affected me. There are so many things that I subconsciously forgot about my mom and my childhood because I didn't want to remember them. It is painful to remember them. But engaging my story through writing, it helps bring those memories back up, right? And so now as I write them, I can actually see them on paper. It helps get my memory going in a way that just thinking about it doesn't, right? Or typing on my phone doesn't. So that can be a way a lot of men that I work with, they'll be like, oh, well, yeah, I don't remember anything from when I was a kid. Great. I used to say the same thing. So let's start remembering things. And you can do it.
Yeah.
I think that's a tool that is very effective, and there can be a lot of resistance to that. But again, it's using the right tool at the right time. I wouldn't have somebody on my first session give them homework to be like, okay, now go write the story of your life and bring it back next week. That's just not going to happen.
It's interesting that you have very much a narrative style, which for me that's been critical.
Having a heart posture of kindness and compassion towards yourself and your story and your life is what ultimately is truly freeing. That also goes for the betrayed partner.
Yeah.
And I would never say this to a woman who's in acute betrayal, right? The first day or a few months even. Or maybe I would. I don't know. Never say never. But it's like, as we can unpack the story and he and her can begin to see with a compassionate, kind heart what was going on for that boy, typically, that pornography was the best tool that he had in order to cope with life. And that set him off on a trajectory to deal with his pain using pornography. Behind every man who struggles with pornography is a story that's dying to be told. And if we can compassionately get to those stories, bring them to the light through narrative therapy or story work, then we can have compassion. There's a picture I used to carry around in my wallet when I used to have a wallet. Remember those? Yep. Of me.
Remember those?
Yeah. My mom was a pilot. Of me flying a plane, sitting in my mom's lap. And so when I look at that picture and I just see, wow, this kid, he loved his mom and his mom loved him. And then she crashed. I don't know if it was that plane, but she crashed a plane and died. And that boy lost everything. Not to excuse the behavior. I would never excuse the behavior away. But can we then look at that boy, look at that picture, and look at how this life unfolded into what ultimately became destructive behavior because he was running away from some sort of pain? It's not always easy to think of myself or my story that way, right? Holding myself in contempt or we're our own worst critics. But being reminded of that. We're all just little kids trying to get along with each other. Well, most of us try to get along with each other, but I would say most of us are just acting like big kids in life. And so getting to the heart of what's really going on the inside is vitally important.
That's fantastic.
Love it.
I really love the way you laid all that out. It just has been really true of my recovery, right? People have different experiences, but I think that was all well said. Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah. The authors that have been most helpful are Jay Stringer, the author of Unwanted, Adam Young, the author of Make Sense of Your Story, and then Dan Allender, who's kind of a heavy influence on those guys. And then for women who have been betrayed, the book The Betrayal Bind by Michelle Mays is a really helpful resource for women.
Awesome.
Michelle Mays is great. Yeah. That book, I use that kind of as a handbook for my women's groups. I think the most important thing is just think for a second, if you're listening to this and you're struggling with pornography, why are you doing that? Just think, why am I masturbating while watching strangers have sex? What's really going on beneath the surface? A man without a purpose or vision in life distracts himself with pleasure. So what's going on in your life to where maybe there's a lack of meaning and you're just trying to go feel good for a second? Does masturbation while watching pornography feel good? Yes, for a very short period of time. And then it feels way worse afterwards. And so just think about what's going on in your life and that there's a much bigger story here than just somebody who's watching pornography or infidelity or whatever it is. And you're worth it to dive into that story compassionately to figure out what your purpose is in life, because I believe each person is created with a unique purpose and vision that only they can execute on this planet. I don't know why I'm the porn guy or one of the porn guys on social media, but it's really fun doing it. And it can be heartbreaking sometimes, but it's like a great joy in my life to be able to be in these spaces with people to unpack these stories.
Right.
And everybody has a purpose and vision and calling in their life, and living that is probably the hardest work that we can do. And it's the most fulfilling work that we can do.
Well said, man. This was awesome.
Austin, thanks for flying out. What I'm taking from you is the power of story and recovery. If you can get into your heart space and you can understand the story for the first time and process it and feel it and let it be true, that's where recovery starts.
Yeah. So you can see it differently.
I had a client who I worked with here in Salt Lake, and I met up with him for dinner, and he gave me permission to share this. We were having dinner. He's like, hey, don't cry when I tell you what I'm about to tell you. I'm like, all right, well, you don't get to decide that.
Like, good luck with that.
Okay. And he's like, he goes, you sharing your story with me saved my life. And I'm like, all right, well, thank you. And I'm just the messenger, right? But thank you. And then we talked about it, the power of story, right?
Yep.
He was considering taking his own life. The Holy Spirit in me, being willing to be courageous enough to share what's really going on in my heart. I never thought that was worth anything. This was like 2 hours ago. I'm like, wow, thank you for reminding me of why I'm here, why I do this work. It's just incredibly humbling. Power of story.
Find us on social media at Unashamed Unafraid. Get access to our bonus content and become an outsider on unashamedunafraid.com. And Austin, if people want to get in contact with you, how can they do that?
Porn Coach, Pxrn Coach, porncoach.com, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. You can email me at hello@porncoach.com, Pxrncoach.com.
Sounds great. Yeah. Until next time, continue to live unashamed.